guys. We've got another Blockchain Council podcast, and this time we've got a couple of very interesting people. And the reason we've got them because some very interesting things are happening this time around. It's literally across the globe. We've got Myna joining us from New York, where I believe she is currently curating an event that is underway. So Myna, quickly, could we have like an introduction of yourself and about the event as well, that's going on currently?
Sure. Thank you for inviting me. It's very exciting to be here. My name is Myna Mukherjee. I'm an artistic cultural producer as well as a curator from the visual arts section, but also work in multidisciplinary focus areas across the visual arts, which means performance and film and theater and music. And I started off actually on Wall Street several years back in New York, where I was working for a convertibles arbitrage hedge fund. And I had a technology background, which I gave up to start a feminist dance theater company, and then went on to create a cultural production house. That the focus was really very much on pushing South Asian arts mainstream in the United States. And we were very successful in being able to do that. We worked with the Lincoln Center, Asia Society, some of the most reputed institutional organizations in the diasporic space. And I've been in India for the past 7 years now. And last year, we took India's biggest exhibition of over 66 artists and 300 artworks to Italy and placed them in museums, 3 different museums, and Europe's most pivotal art fair. So there's a certain kind of ghettoization that happens with the South Asian arts that we are trying to break. We want to lead from the East. There is a very big global South movement that's happening. Technology plays a huge part in that because, as you know, India is the new creator economy. And I come from this is an exciting place for me to play in because I have a tech background and love the visual arts. So one of the things that we did this year, in the beginning of this year at the India Art Fair, was introduce this idea of bringing, some of the most cutting edge South Asian artists into a disruptive space called Techni Disruptors. It was a show. And at the India Habitat Center as a parallel to the India Art Fair. And the show was so successful, it was completely bought out by one of India's best known institutional spaces and collectors. And since it was so successful, we decided we would bring it to the West, and New York seemed the perfect place. The Jaipur Literature Festival was having its second edition, but its first edition since COVID. And we thought that it would be a great organization to partner with. And they loved the idea. Sanjay had seen the event at the India Habitat Center. And so we were the opening and the closing of the Literature Festival, the New York City edition here. The show continues till September 30th, and we are in the Chelsea main art district. And we've had, an incredible amount of excitement, both institutionally as well as in the general audience who are walking by, lots of walk-ins and lots of curiosity around this work.
For sure. Arpit, could we quickly have an introduction from you as well, man?
Hi, everyone. Happy to be part of this podcast. I'm Arpit. I'm part of Polygon's enterprise team. I lead business development for APAC region. Super excited to be part of this. So I'll just keep the intro short, maybe,
Yeah, please. No, actually, take your time.
Yeah. So, okay. So I think at this time, I'll briefly introduce Polygon also. So Polygon is a scalability platform for Ethereum. So we have been in existence since 2017. Today, Polygon has over 37,000 decentralized applications that run on the platform, including the best of the DeFi applications, games and metaverses. Then we have a lot of brands which have trusted Polygon to drop their NFTs in last few months. Then every day Polygon processes around 4 million transactions on the network, and till date we have processed some 2 billion transactions. So it's a very well developed protocol. We have been a trusted protocol for use cases across different sectors, and we are now kind of evolving into much more than, for example, Polygon started with something called as Polygon POS, which is the classic offering that we have. Now we are kind of evolving and bringing in a lot of nuanced scalability solutions, such as ZK EVMs, which we announced few weeks back, Polygon ID, Polygon Nightfall, and Polygon Avail, which are going to be really critical for making Ethereum mainstream in times to come.
Definitely, man. Before you started off, I could have told you Polygon is something that needs no introduction, at least on this podcast. If our audiences really don't know what Polygon is, then I'd definitely suggest they Google it and find out, where the future is headed. Mentioning the future, we've got Harshit, who has just joined us. Harshit, I'd love to get an intro from you, man.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you for having me. It's super exciting to be part of this podcast. So I'm an artist. I work with artificial intelligence, machine learning, and other emerging technologies like virtual reality, augmented reality for my art. I do come from a background of technology studies. So I started my studies in India at IIT Guwahati, then moved to the MIT Media Lab for my master's, and then sort of started feeling a little bit of a sense of discomfort or disconnect with technology in some sense, because I started feeling that there was a lack of kind of building a more intimate relation with technology, and not it being about only sort of efficiency and productivity. So I started thinking about making art with technology, and that's what I've been doing for many years now. And this whole space of NFTs and Metaverse, for someone who could proudly call themselves a digitally native artist, I think it's been really exciting for this evolution to happen, because for me, I think the work does get a certain sense of legitimacy and a certain sense of the idea of provenance, etc., sort of gets built in very naturally into the whole concept of NFTs, and also the whole idea of being able to think of the metaverse as a space where, I can think of that as another medium for expressing the ways in which we are shaping the future of how people are going to socially interact with each other. I think the last wave of such an event caused a massive disruption in how sort of humanity evolved for the next couple of decades. And I think we're at that sort of starting point where especially I think it's critical for artists to start engaging with this space also, so that we can shape the future of this space and not necessarily allow sort of a more singular kind of viewpoint to shape and suck us into this space in some sense. So yeah, that's where I come from, and excited to have this conversation with all of you.
Definitely, man. AI generated art takes expressionism onto a completely different level, purely on the basis of increasing participation from the masses. I mean, it's absolutely insane what's happening right now in the system. Quickly moving with a list of questions, that are drafted for you guys. Arpit, first off, I understand you guys are doing a lot of work around the metaverse. So I want to understand, like, what sort of an approach do you feel should, businesses be looking at? Should they be looking at starting from scratch, or maybe using an existing platform and building on top of that? Like, for in this case, Second Life and Minecraft are something that have like hordes of users right now, hordes of die-hard users. I mean, would it make more sense to add blockchain aspects to those platforms, or is it really essential to build from scratch?
I think, Rohan, the answer to that would be slightly, I would there are certain layers to it, right? So it depends to begin with, it depends on a lot of things. For example, when I look at metaverse from the point of view of businesses, right, the first question that you should ask is, what is the core business of that business, right? let's say if that business is into social networks, for example, something like Meta, which already has a huge captive audience on their other platforms, so definitely it would make sense for them to create something of their own, right? So it may make sense, right? But let's say for something, for example, for a maybe for a automotive company, right, which wants to create strong VR experiences, and they want to capture that new market segment, which is like the Web3 native market segment, which goes to these metaverses and experiences of the digital world in a totally different way, right? So for them, it may make sense to leverage the metaverses which are already there. So essentially,
Okay.
like very briefly, it depends on what is the core business that you have. It does not make sense for every business to create their own metaverse experience. Like that does not make sense at all, because that's not using your best. Whatever you are best at, you should kind of focus very, very nicely on that, and then leverage people who have already created these metaverses. For example, and I think not just so NFT created that 𝗏𝗏𝗄𝗵, right, which is a commerce focused metaverse. Now, for any retail brand, it rather than creating their own metaverse, what would make sense is become part of that retail focus, because all of the
definitely, I mean, they don't want to make that their core competency.
Yeah,
they want to focus on what they do best.
All of the rails that are needed for that, be it payments, lead generation, your VR experiences, all of that is pre-built into that experience. You need not create your own stuff. So that's one. And I think secondly, it's also a philosophical question. For example, you mentioned Second Life. Second Life is what we call Web 2 kind of a metaverse, which is still centralized. Then there is this another philosophical way of thinking at it, where it's at its core, it is decentralized, right? So Second Life can get some of the elements from the Web3 type of metaverses, for example, ownership of digital assets, etc., and merge it into whatever experience.
I mean, they have a version of that. I mean, they have their own currency called the Linden dollar, if I'm not mistaken. And then they even have an exchange. They even have an exchange where you can, whatever you earn inside, you can actually bring that into the real world. So, I mean, going into the blockchain space with that, for me, would be the most obvious way to go around it, if that's possible.
Linden dollar has been there for a long time. Like, it's not something
for a while, yeah.
It has been there. So Second Life launched 2003, if I am not wrong, right? It has been there for long. But now the idea is that world. So essentially, what Second Life is doing, they're trying to, let's say, close the ecosystem that they are into, their own dollars and all of that. What Web3 is trying to do is open this up with a lot of different experiences, which are interconnected. You have assets which are interchangeable, so on and so forth. So I think that's the second aspect which needs to be evaluated.
Definitely. This actually brings me to a very interesting question, which is, I'm going to go through all of you with this. Which sci-fi depiction are we the closest to? I mean, you've all seen sci-fi movies, Blade Runner, Star Trek, and all those other kinds of stuff. Where do you feel, or what event are we the closest to from what you've seen in the movies? Harshit, I'd love to go with you first.
I mean, so I do have a little, like, it could be controversial, but I do have a little controversial take to sci-fi in general. I think it definitely helps bring ideas to the fore, but I think the whole conversation with sci-fi, the sort of the real meat of the conversation gets pushed a little bit. I think, like, there's always this notion within sci-fi to think of, this sort of timeline where, let's say, robots are taking over the world, or the whole Ready Player One kind of scenario is being implemented.
I'm going to get to Ready Player One very soon.
Yeah. So, but what I do feel, I think, especially like working as an artist, what is more critical is to engage with how we get there, right? And not like at what point are we going to get there. So to think of, for example, a recent work that I did called Landing Page, which is about this idea of data colonialism and digital colonialism, where it exists in multiple manifestations of virtual reality within Oculus, where you sort of are, you're immersed in a land of poppy plantations, and everything in that land is made up of advertisement videos on which most money was spent on Facebook over the last 2 years. And sort of the whole idea is a spin on thinking of how in today's times there is a certain sense of colonization happening with companies sort of doing a data grab from people similar to a land grab, what sort of the early colonizers did like 100 and 150 years ago, right? And I think another version of this work sort of exists as a decentraland parcel. So I bought a plot of land on Decentraland and sort of recreated this work there to question this whole idea of our natural media is becoming one, our natural environment is becoming one of media. And even like when we talk of, let's say, the metaverse and things like that, and we speak from more utopic visions of decentralization and ownership being distributed, etc. But are we really headed towards that? So I create this land space, which is again completely made up of advertisements, and you walk in and you're just surrounded.
I mean, Harshit, the tangent you're on right now is a very heavy one, man. Like, you know, this is like a rabbit hole. But like from what my perspective I was coming was like, you know, like the Star Trek Midway. Like I can honestly see like a VR headset in the next 5 years where you could overlay MRI data onto an actual body, and maybe that would help the surgeon navigate better through the human body. So just to like, you know, excite your inner child, like what would you like want to see happen like within the next 5 to 10 years that maybe you've seen on screen?
What I would love for to happen is not convert the metaverse into a space of capitalistic ownership and singular ownership, and have people
too late for that. That's
the ability to I don't think it's too late, very honestly. I think we're at sort of the right time to critically engage with this. And I think if more artists sort of start engaging with these technological discourses, so that it just draws more people into the conversation, right? Like what happened earlier was the shaping of this space without sort of a larger cultural artistic discourse around it. So that would be my dream, but I will still sort of also answer the question in terms of sci-fi fascination. And so, I mean, I studied at the Media Lab, which was all about creating or realizing sci-fi in some sense, right? Yep. So I do also see the potential for spaces like the metaverse and virtual reality spaces to build a deeper sense of empathy and sort of transcend the idea of the physical limitations of the human body, right? So things like, and there is actually like research which was done at the lab and at Microsoft Research, which shows this whole idea of homuncular flexibility, where the idea of like you reconfiguring your body in a way to be able to interact with sort of 4 limbs, for example, or 4 hands, for example, right? And be able to do tasks in a way that sort of require physical augmentation, but in a digital sort of way.
Yeah.
And there was a very beautiful project around the idea of gender swap, where in a virtual reality space, you sort of experienced yourself as the other gender. And I think projects like these or spaces like these, I think, are what make me feel really optimistic about the metaverse as a space that allows you to experience things that do not necessarily happen naturally, and that helps you build a certain sense of empathy and a certain sense of connectedness. So yeah, that would be my
totally agree with that.
The metaverse.
Myna, I see you smiling there. I know you have.
Yeah. So just quickly, I was scared for a second because I thought that, you know, I'm a huge sci-fi fan, so yeah. I see so many parallels. So Avatar, I mean, Harshit, what you were talking about, the marine, paraplegic who gets to, experience this beautiful space. as a full-limbed person is able to jump around trees, jump from cliffs. I mean, I think that the Web3 space is so ripe for that, exercising in an environment, while you feel like you're traveling through the streets of Rome. I mean, that's possible already.
I mean, fear of heights in VR is real. Like, I've played a Spider-Man game where my legs started shaking at the top of, a skyscraper. That was real.
Yeah, and then and there are so many, like District 9 in terms of it's another sci-fi film, but talking about surveillance. And I've seen, how surveillance has infiltrated our world. AI has infiltrated our world in so many ways. Early films, Will Smith's film, I don't know if you guys remember. I mean, I could go on and on, but there's so much in sci-fi films that are today reality. I mean, we don't even think twice about it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, the list goes on and on, but I think surveillance, AI, predictive behavior, all of that is something that we've grown up with and have been fascinated with.
I mean, Star Trek, I remember they used to have those flip tricorders, and then we had the Motorola's flip phones. So that was like pretty crazy.
Yes.
Arpit,
I think, go
sorry,
ahead.
Myna. Yeah, you.
No, go ahead. I mean, I was just going to say that Avatar is a classic example because it's not that far back. And everything that Avatar, sort of we saw in Avatar for the first time is today a reality in many ways. So, yeah.
Definitely. Arpit, the same thing, man.
So I'm a old school guy, and I'm going to go back to something which is very obvious, but neither Harshit nor Myna went there. Maybe a happier version of Matrix. Yeah, so
we're already in that.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I'm saying. We keep on thinking that when is this sci-fi going to happen? But I think we are already very well deep into Matrix.
It's the frog in the boiling water. We're already there.
It's maybe more physical than digital, but we are already there, right? So maybe easily 60% of life is digital today, right? So physical interactions, they have reduced, which is not by the way not a good thing, honestly, maybe, right? So but I think that sci-fi fantasy is somewhat there already, right? So if you look at, let's say, Web3 native generation, like the kids who are playing Roblox and all of these games today, like they have a very different way of consuming content than us. For example, when we started using internet, we couldn't care less who controls our data. We would even know that there is something called as our data, which is going to be profiled by someone, right? But Web3 natives are very different, right? They are very curious about data privacy, and they're very, very cautious about censorship resistance, which is bringing back to this conversation when I relate it to arts and expression of your thoughts. I think censorship resistance is something which is very critical and very important for these Web3 natives, right? And they have a spirit of decentralization. Like, so you can see that people want to run away from anything which kind of tries to create a unnatural controlled structure, right? So this is not how it was supposed to be. Maybe this is maybe what.
Sure, man. I honestly feel this is a nice battle that they have between centralization and decentralization, because 100% of either one of them isn't a good idea.
Yeah.
There needs to be like a fine balance.
Yeah. So maybe what Harshit referred to as capitalism, right? So something, this Web3 generation, they are kind of running away from that in a totally different philosophical direction, and Web3 is going to emerge into something which is much more nuanced and much more creative than what we have today. This is the era of primitives, right? So building blocks are being made, your ID solutions are being made. People are essentially what is happening is tech disruption has happened to a certain extent, right? It is going on, right? And then what people are doing, they are using their frameworks which they have created in past. They are looking through those frameworks at this new technology. That is where the limitation is coming, right? So people look at it by creating some peripheral use cases. Okay, we have been doing this physically, let's create a jacket digitally and put it as an NFT, right? These are peripheral use cases, which are a good thing to start with. But real breakthrough is going to happen once somebody breaks into a totally new business model, and then new frameworks are going to be created to actually consume this new type of web that we are creating. So I think that's going to be interesting to see.
Definitely, I agree with you. And just an extension on that question, since you're at Polygon and, right at the forefront of this kind of development that's taking place. I mean, Polygon is one of the chains that, any future metaverses being developed in the blockchain space would want to be associated with in some way or the other. So what's in the pipeline? Are you guys working on something brilliant? Is there something you guys are launching in the next 6 months?
So I think a lot of activity is going on in Polygon. So fundamentally, what we are doing is we are trying to create a better decentralization layer. Essentially, that's what we are doing. Making it more user friendly, making it more developer focused, developer centric, to give them a better experience, and making it affordable so that anybody and everybody can build on top of that, and essentially give them those foundational blocks which are necessary for such a future, right? So some interesting things that we are working on is ZK EVM. ZK EVM we announced a few weeks back in 𝗙𝗏𝗃 Paris. This is a lot of improvement is going to happen on that. So ZK EVM action is going on. Polygon ID. We conducted first use cases where we enabled anonymous voting on a DAO using Polygon ID. That is going to be a fundamental piece which we are continuously working on. So this is a SSID solution, right, which essentially gives user back the control of their personal information. This is going to be very critical. Then we have Polygon Nightfall. Polygon Nightfall will give that anonymity layer or a privacy layer within the public blockchains. Essentially, this will be critical for enterprise users and enterprise use cases. Let's say some layer of metaverse interactions, maybe.
And these are literally all the building blocks. That's
absolutely, yes, absolutely. And the biggest one that that is going to change the whole dynamics is Polygon Avail, which is a data availability solution, which will make the transactions a lot cheaper because this provides a totally different way of handling data on chain. So I think these are some of the action. This is some of the action that is happening on technical development side. We are working. So this year has been really amazing for Polygon. We have got into some really interesting engagements with Starbucks, Meta on their digital assets, then Adobe, Behance, Stripe around payments.
Yeah. There've been a lot of tie-ups.
Flipkart
of tie-ups in the last 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, and all of these are projects which are going live. For example, Flipkart did that fire drops and all of that, right? So all
that
of
was
this
along with the EDAW people, Meru and gang.
So which is happening very fast. Also, we are working very closely with biggest of the brands in BFSI, retail space, and a lot of different sectors. So I think this is something which is happening. We are pretty excited for the future.
Definitely, man. And just as we're talking about the future, I wanted to ask all you guys the same question. Like, how much do you guys understand about Minecraft? Like, it's been around for ages. I just took an interest into it over the last year and a half. My niece and nephew have been my teachers. They've been showing me stuff, and I've been constantly blowing my mind. Their definition of a server is a place where they can hang out. And that was the first time my mind was blown. And since then, I always spend at least a couple of hours with them just to understand how social interactions work for these guys. Because as they grow older, these kind of, interaction becomes more and more important. The kind of art that they create inside, the kind of other things, the behavior as well. So any views on that from you guys? Harshad, I'll go with you first.
Yeah, I completely sort of relate with your excitement of Minecraft. I think it's a very exciting space. Like you said, right, for being a game and sort of for social interaction. And what I find fascinating is how like even my younger cousins feel so natural to be in that space. Like it just they just know exactly what needs to be done, and then they know how to build a space, etc. What I find also fascinating is for spaces like these to have a nice sort of educational component to it, where this whole idea of how to build spaces and think from sort of an ecological manner in terms of constructionism. I think that really plays out nicely in these spaces. And I think at the same time, sort of being mindful of the sort of, addictive nature of such spaces also in some sense, and sort of the little bit of cut off from reality, so to say, that happens. And I mean, like Arpit also mentioned, right, like almost 60-70% of our time is spent in digital spaces, and for sort of a younger population, that's even more. And I do think that I actually recently created a work called The Garden of Digital Delights, which was a spin on a very famous painting called The Garden of Earthly Delights, done many hundreds of years ago. And today, sort of the idea of delight has become so digitally native in some sense, where the most popular YouTube video is of cartoons, right? The most watched YouTube video ever is of kids' cartoons. And
children are ruling the way these algorithms are functioning, yes.
Exactly. And to sort of like hook people up into this sort of digital dopamine kind of a scenario very early on in their lives, I think can have counter effects also. So what I'm trying to get to is these are great platforms, the way sort of people end up interacting with them, and the way we can consciously create strategies for engagement that are more developmental rather than sort of done from this viewpoint of keeping them in that space for a longer and longer time. I think that is what is more important for me. So as a space for constructionism, like there are platforms like the Scratch programming language, etc., that also have a similar kind of feel as Minecraft, which allows you to build your own spaces, but then they have inbuilt into them sort of theories of how to program, how to think about sort of logical progressions in terms of construction of a space, etc. So I think yeah, like the way in which we shape these environments, I think is very important, and not only view it as a space for just hanging out for a longer and
optimizing UI UX, for the user is very important as opposed to advertisers. That should be primary concern. Arpit, same thing, man. Minecraft, like, have you used it? Do you have kids? Is your little one crazy into Minecraft?
Okay, so to be very fair, I don't have kids and I haven't used it, but I'll kind of touch upon it in a very general sense, right? So, and this kind of ties back to the way that I answered an earlier question also, that this whole generation is totally new, right? So if you talk about the social interactions, right? So there is a very famous dialogue from that Dark Knight Rises, right? So where Bane tells Batman that, I was born in this darkness, right? So, so these people are born into this, right? So the social interactions,
the multiverse natives, metaverse natives.
The social interactions that you will see from this generation, that will be very different. For them, it will make sense to buy an artifact jacket, right? It will make sense to buy a skin by paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars, right?
I mean, I'm a gamer. I love games. I'm sorry to butt in. I'm a gamer. I love gaming. And while playing these FPS games, the skins on the guns, which literally don't mean anything, they are selling for like 400-500 euros, and I'm stunned. I'm like, that's how much a guitar costs at times, like a good one.
Rohan, that's the difference. You said that does not mean anything, but for this generation, that's a very strong way of social signaling.
Yeah, it is definitely.
That's a way of social signaling. It gives a sense of what is the reputation of this gamer. Is he a really cool gamer? Is like deep into gaming? How much money do they have? It's all social signaling, again in a totally different format, right? So today we wear brands and all of that. So a lot of that has to do with social signaling, what stature we are, how much money do we have, what is the status in the society, and all of that, right? That's a substantial part of the communication that we have across any platform, right? So similar things are kind of being translated, and it feels very natural to this Web3 native generation, right? And it is going to be like that, right? So we may try to make sense of it. There will be a lot of nuances to it, but I think it's very natural. It's not something which is kind of artificial or something. It's very natural. They are experiencing this world in a very different way, right? So for them, all the quests in Minecraft may make a lot of sense. Then, as why would you even engage with that game, right? But
not just Quest, people have been making like these libraries on Minecraft. They've been creating some crazy sets, recreating like, Battlestar Galactica on Minecraft. So that actually takes a lot of time, ingenuity, and, attention to detail. Yeah. So that is pretty crazy. And I think Sandbox and some of these other platforms, they have teleporters where you can actually use the same designs and bring them onto different platforms. So that interoperability is something that these guys are, I think, working on as well. Myna, again, the same question. What do you think about Minecraft?
I have lots of nieces and nephews who are constantly, showing me Minecraft. And, my first concern was always, of course, I went to a very tech-heavy school where everyone played. There were gamers throughout the night. I went to Carnegie Mellon and they were playing Tetris for like all hours of the day and night for years and years, and were addicted to it. So my first concern was a little bit about the addictive nature of Minecraft. Having said that, I'm also like Harshit, fascinated to see how that same environment could be pulled and used developmentally. I mean, Arpit said, why would kids would an adult engage with it? But I kind of feel like if that same environment was to be somehow parallelly or juxtaposed onto, say, a virtual art gallery or like a curator walk through a space, I mean, people in the art world love to hang out, and also to create things, and it's a social space where people stay for hours and hours. And I'm wondering how some of this addictiveness could be channeled into the virtual art space, also to bridge this gap that seems to exist between the physical world of art and the new exciting world of NFT art that has just come up. So I'm always curious. And I was talking to Meta actually about that. There was a Meta conversation that was happening, and they were saying, and one of the things that we were talking about was to create maybe a space where people can just go hang out in an art exhibition opening. I mean, it's very addictive. No one wants to leave. We had to literally push people out from art. And there were people from the MoMA Web3 folks were there. Of course, Polygon Studios, who was one of our wonderful sponsors for the event. The head, Brian Trunzo, was there. And there was someone, the marketing person from Meta was there. And we were talking about just this, about creating like a virtual space for art where people could just come hang out, people who loved art, and discuss art in a virtual space, or see exhibitions or travel to different exhibitions virtually.
Yeah, I mean, social signaling is something that you would be really interested in, because from a curator standpoint, that's really interesting to explore what these guys get out of having these NFTs. I mean, having said that, I just want to follow up this question with the fact that, is this the first major event with respect to NFTs that you're doing? And if yes, I mean, did it live up to the hype?
Actually, that's no. We did our first NFT event. Well, we did an art and technology exhibition. We also did, I presented at 𝗙𝗵𝗵𝗄, the first AI exhibition that Harshit was a part of and was curated by 𝗡𝗙𝗪𝗏, the collective, and it was in one of India's best known galleries, 𝗙𝗵𝗵𝗄. Then I did Harshit's AI solo show in an institutional space like Imami. And that was really fantastically received as well. And then we did an art and tech show, but that was primarily NFT based, and NFTs from the global south, not just from Asia, or not just from South Asia, but from across the globe. And that was very successful. Actually, that did not have as much hype, but was a complete, like I said, was totally sold out. And we are not talking about, quantity of works or several editions of works. I mean, these were well-known artists, single editions that were sold to one of India's most well-known institutional buyer. We've also been able to place work with the New Media Museum in Milan, which are all huge things. The fact that MoMA today in New York City was so excited about the show that they came and participated. But not only did they come for the opening talk, they came back twice after and want to do more stuff, and have just announced in the New York Times that they have a separate fund of almost 70 million for just NFTs. Tells you that we've definitely helped aid the hype around NFTs. and also help bridge and bring credibility to this space, because oftentimes the conversation is a little bit fractured and split. It is a lot of gaming and special effects, NFTs who support, and a community of them who support each other. And that is really wonderful and exciting to see. But there's also an entire world of art, visual artists who have analog practices, and actually very well-known digital and photography artists who are now starting to look at the NFT world with far more interest. Whereas in the past, it has been with a lot of wariness, So the more you have established well-known names plus emerging artists enter this space, the long-term sustenance of the space will be maintained. I feel like you need people from all sorts of mediums to come into the NFT space and break open the possibilities of the NFT, like we say.
Definitely. And I mean, one of the floods that I can see coming into the NFT space is from artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
I have personally been using Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, and a bunch of other softwares, and I'm personally blown to bits. I've never seen something like this before. And any presentation deck that I am also an artist, but from a business perspective, I don't need any design support anymore. If I'm making a website, if I'm making anything, I'd had to spend hours to scour the internet for the right images and with the proper rights. But now, within 20 minutes, I'm done. If some of my film friends, they want a storyboard, it takes them maybe a couple of months, bam, it's over in a day or two. So this is serious real world use cases. Do you feel like the artist community is threatened? Are they able to adapt? Do they see the value in it? Are they pessimistic?
I'd like to take that question if that's okay.
Please.
I think the artist community is all of that. Artist communities feel a lot of FOMO right now. They're like, what are we missing out?
I can see that, yeah.
They also feel threatened because they see technology as displacing them and human labor. And the whole point, there were multiple reasons why we did this exhibition, and we did it in a particular way. One of the things that we're trying to repeatedly, talk about is how technology is an enabler, and it doesn't necessarily displace the human effort. In fact, even with AI, when we did the AI show with Harshit, these were questions that came at us in a very big way. Is that if the AI creates such beautiful work, then why do you need a human artist? And so then we worked on projects that were quite extraordinary, because we worked with, I think Harshit and 64𝗵𝗁 came up with this fantastic work called Strange Genders that had 2,500 artists work on these stick figures of what they thought of as a male and a female. And then the computer was fed this information and was asked about, what it thought of as a female. And what it spat out was not just one concrete image, but a spectrum of images. And it's beautiful. I'll send you an image of that later on.
Please, I'd love to see that.
Yeah. And it also it was of much fascination to gender departments across some of the most well-known academics. Sort of attended a panel discussion we had recently, and they said that it was fantastic to see the AI respond, not with one image, but with a spectrum of images. So it was, and it went back in a reverse way and kind of gave credibility to what the gender theorists are saying across the world, saying that gender is not binary, rather it's a spectrum, So things like that, I think AI is going to play a major role in helping convey to a lot of artists who feel like, they take art very seriously. I think that I think a lot of the gaming NFTs that have come up are very playful, and that's beautiful, and I really love that. But for a lot of artists who are perhaps traditionalists, having them encounter art that engages viscerally with them and engages intellectually with them and helps they have certain parameters for what they consider serious art. For them to encounter NFT art or art and technology that matches those parameters is very important, because then they feel, and so more and more they are, I think we are pulling them into this space. We've been very successful. We've had people like Seema Kohli and 𝗙𝗲𝗵𝗶 and 𝗛𝗲𝗍𝗶 and 𝗡𝗙𝗃. I mean, these are some of the biggest names in contemporary art right now in India. And they are working and playing with augmented reality. They are working with just digitization of their works. But we also have masters of digital work like 𝗦𝗽𝗲𝗃𝗃, for example, who's literally, I would say, after Raza and Souza, I mean, the next generation of Raza and Souza. And they are now starting to look at the NFT space more seriously as well. So we feel very privileged to kind of lead this conversation in India. I don't think that conversation is really happening in any other space. And we hope to be more and more, build believers in this space.
Definitely. I mean, you mentioned you've got a Wall Street background, and I want to come back to this, but I just want to stay on this thread of AI for a second with Harshad. Harshad, one thing that I really like to do every couple of weeks, man, is to give him the same prompt again in Midjourney and see the way the AI has progressed. And it's been nuts, like a few months ago, it wasn't doing faces, it wasn't doing hands, but now it's come a long way. And same question to you, man. Do you feel threatened? I mean, I know you're new in the space. There've been artists that have been, working on certain mediums for like 20 years, 25 years. Their perspective also, is from a different angle. Your perspective would be from a different angle. But do you see this as an opportunity or a threat at this point in time?
Yeah, I mean, new from a 25-year-old timeline, definitely, but not new from the AI art timeline. I've been making AI art for as long as it has existed, especially sort of deep learning based artwork since early 2013, 2014. So I think, for me in that sense, I think it's really beautiful. I don't see this in any way as a threat or anything of that sort. I think it's beautiful that everyone has the access to sort of use platforms like Midjourney, DALL-E, and create visual works that they find exciting and interesting. For me as an artist, I think what is important, and art has always done that over centuries, is to find sort of newer ways to engage with the medium. And if something can be done, then sort of how to extend that boundary a little bit more so that you're able to realize the intention of your work in ways that are more interesting, novel, that poke at questions about the medium itself. So sort of thinking of things like, where does all this data come from? And the works like Myna was alluding to, strange genders, where you use sort of the entire cycle of data collection, data processing, etc., to create work that really speaks to a certain subject, instead of, let's say, using like a platform like Midjourney, DALL-E, which has sort of not been trained specifically for your purposes, right? So I think there are multiple ways in which sort of as an artist, I am engaging with AI. It's not simply about like, having a particular thought and just like creating an image of that thought. So I think with certain other work like called Unstill Life, the whole idea of actually trying to teach machine the aesthetic difference between the compositional and the painterly. So the idea of actually using the training process as the craft of an AI artist. So playing around with parameters of learning rate, sort of randomly cropping data sets so that the machine is exposed to different parts of the imagery during its learning process. So I think like the real craft of an AI artist starts to lie in that realm where just as, I mean, if I had to draw a very quick analogy to, let's say, a potter, right? Like the amount of water they add during sort of the process of
Definitely, for the consistencies of the clay
and the pressure, etc. So I think like training an AI algorithm is that craft, and for an artist to work deeply with that so that they are able to come up with sort of aesthetic outcomes that they intend. I think so. All of that is sort of the depth to which I'm embedded in the AI art space, and I definitely think that it's really nice that a community of people are now able to sort of create things that they want to create and accelerate the process of their creation, like you're saying, for storyboarding for filmmakers, etc. It's great that that acceleration.
I might have named like 2 out of 1,000 uses, just like off the top of my head.
No, and I mean, like all industries, I think you're right. This is going to disrupt all industries, but that
I could feed a piece. I could feed a piece of the land that I have, and then ask for an intricate solar-powered house, and maybe it gives me a design that I can give to the architect and tell him to fine-tune this. That's definitely going to cost me less.
Wow.
Right. And this whole, there's also an analogy to draw to the photography moment in some sense in the art world, right? Where up till then, sort of artists had this major responsibility of mimicking reality and painting reality to the best extent possible. And then you had photography, but that did not like stop the existence of artists, right? It in fact just helped them sort of push out from this confine and do more sort of their own abstract perceptions of what depicting reality would mean, and then it led to all kinds of art movements that we've been so blessed to have as part of our culture, right? So I think, and I say this sometimes as sort of a spin on thinking of this, like the invention of cars does not automate the act of walking, right? So I think there is a space for everything to sort of coexist and help build on top of each other. And yeah, I mean, bottom line, I'm excited by sort of this democratization of the ability to create visuals. And there's no reason why I would sort of feel fearful of that. I think it's exciting for everyone to.
So I'm going to make this a little dark now. We're going to focus a little on the freedoms part. Arpit had briefly spoken about censorship aspects and everything. So the Cronenberg universe is something that's completely banned on Midjourney. You cannot prompt images from that because of the level of gore. And there are a certain number of keywords that you can't be using in these forums. So, generally people are talking about the regular hits like freedom of speech and all that stuff. But here we have freedom of thought, and the AI is playing like spoil sport. I'm a huge zombie movie fan. I'd love to maybe explore zombies in the Cronenberg universe, but that's not possible. I mean, how do you see this, and how would you address this issue? Limitations of thought. Arpit, I'll go with you first.
Rohan, I think, again, pardon my lack of context on this one. But I think from a censorship resistance point of view, I think the whole movement of Web3 is at its core that you are you are running all of this backend infrastructure on smart contracts, which is spread across, let's say, 10,000 different nodes, right? So and that too in different geographies, in different jurisdiction and all of that, right? So essentially the idea of regulating some content, or idea of regulating what kind of thoughts can be shared in that, so it is something which has to come from within that community and cannot be imposed externally, right? So and essentially that's where the things are also moving. So not really related to this, but I was having a interesting conversation with people in regulation space, right? So they are now so they now recognize that to regulate, or maybe even to participate in this ecosystem, it is essential for them to come inside this ecosystem and not look at it from outside, to meaningfully communicate within that ecosystem. So that's the trend, and that's where things are going to go, right? So it is going to be so eventually what's going to happen is that a lot of strong communities are going to develop. For example, art communities and all of those communities, maybe powered by some DAO voting and all of that, and those communities are going to eventually decide. So there can be a lot of different things which which become important there. What is your reputation within that community? What kind of voting power do you carry, right? So
I mean, I just want to add something there. I'm sorry to butt in, but I have to. Like, this also corresponds to Harshit's earlier point, between the haves and the have-nots. So now what's happened is I had to take like the $50 subscription for Midjourney. That gives me a private room. Now I can essentially do what I want in there. So, again, even though it's decentralized and everything, but somehow it's still pointing us back to the age-old model. It seems like that's inescapable for some reason.
I think no, it's not inescapable. What is going to, so essentially, that's what I mentioned, right? We are currently using the frameworks that we created. For example, using the money that you have, that financial power that you kind of exercise there by buying that particular room. That is maybe how this specific platform works, right? But essentially, what may end up happening is, let's say there are let's say art communities, right, where the voting or whatever goes on inside, the voting rights depend on the reputation of the person as an artist. So there Arpit does not get a say, get to say what type of content will be banned or what kind of content should be created, because that essentially is something, just by having, let's say, a whole lot of money, buying a lot of tokens, that does not kind of give you that right to exercise that power within that community, right? So essentially now what is going to happen is DAO voting, etc., is going to evolve. So currently, let's say we have a singular way of looking at things. The number of tokens that you own may be directly proportional to the voting rights that you carry inside that community, right? But eventually it is going to evolve. For example,
it's the same problem there, more votes, more tokens. So it's again concentration at some.
I think in 𝗏𝗏, Vitalik Buterin, he shared a pretty interesting thought there, around soul-bound tokens and how DAO governance should evolve. So the whole idea was that we should evolve from this very singular kind of a metric where your tokens give you specific right to vote, to more nuanced ones. There can be soul-bound tokens depending on the community participation that you have had, so on and so forth. So the idea here is that
it's basically building credibility in the community.
Exactly. Maybe credibility can be one. Your reputation as an artist can be second. Your participation in the community can be third, right? And all of those things. So which are totally different from the money that you hold in terms of tokens and all, in form of tokens and all of that. So idea is that these communities may choose to regulate themselves internally depending on a lot of different parameters that they may have, the way they choose. But the whole idea behind this whole Web3 movement is that it needs to be that censorship resistant layer where no external party comes and tells what will go and what will not go, right? So, but yeah, sure. This is what I feel that things are going to evolve into.
Definitely. Harshit, I'd love for your take on this, man. What do you feel about the banned words on Midjourney currently?
Right. I think I sort of do.
I just want to throw in one thing. One of the thoughts, you can use the banned word in a good way as well. It doesn't always translate the same. So yeah, please.
Absolutely. No, I mean, so at this point, I think obviously Midjourney is hardly like 3 months old, or maybe even less than that, right? And I do sort of agree with what Arpit is saying in terms of, this being a lot of the models currently being borrowed from sort of the earlier way of thinking about how the Web2 infrastructure has been laid out, and the commerce around that. And as sort of there like all these sort of notions of thought policing and banning of words, etc., are obviously a double-edged sword in some sense, where if that was not happening, we might have seen a flood of imagery that was very objectionable to large sections of society, right? And then we would have questioned this whole aspect of why weren't Midjourney engineers and creators more mindful of not letting people go into spaces that sort of are objectionable. But at the same time, it's obviously like, who is Midjourney to decide what is objectionable or not, right? So I think that whole sort of like the both sides of the coin do definitely exist, and I think that is the core philosophically of what Web3 and blockchain in some sense is trying to solve, right? So imagine sort of a space where something like a Midjourney evolves into something like a Web3 native space where the idea of it evolving into a DAO comes into existence, let's say, where the ability to vote on the words that can be used or cannot be used becomes a more communal process instead of a group of 10, 12 engineers who built Midjourney deciding sort of what gets banned or not. And I think that
But
is
even there, sorry to butt in again, but the way the community is being added, obviously, we have like a barrier to entry there with people who are able to pay for 5G internet or good laptops, and they have an understanding of Discord. So then your, nuances can come from there. Maybe if North America was the first one to get a huge user base up and they started voting, a lot of the keywords they might have banned, a person from the Middle East might feel totally different about it. But, they sort of enter the community at a much later stage. So that is also something that
and I mean, another like take to or angle to this, I think, which is critical to also engage with, is the whole idea of how machine learning AI is being used by platforms that have grown exponentially, right? Like Facebook, etc., for sort of restricting content on their platform. So these automated systems end up oftentimes perpetuating bias further and banning content which was actually, let's say, like the image of the kid during the Vietnam War became something famous that got banned on Facebook, right? And it came out as something that should not have happened and it was simply an AI system recognizing that as nudity and just not knowing the context at all, right? Or what that image showed. And so sort of, if at some point like you start also like engaging or using automated systems to start policing what is shown on a platform or not, then that also leads to another layer of sort of bias, perpetuity, and complexity that we have to acknowledge and engage with. And I think to again like go back to what Arpit was saying,
so
I think
it actually feels like this issue needs to be addressed at like multiple different layers every single time.
Absolutely. And Midjourney or any such platform will have to start using automated systems in some ways, right? Because the moment this, like, they're already growing very fast, and the moment they hit a certain sort of threshold, there's no way that you can have human moderators simply take up this job. And I don't even want to get into what human moderation is about. And how
we've seen that on Reddit,
how much
and how ugly it can get.
Exactly. And what sort of psychological trauma the human moderators go through, and they're subjected to low pay, etc. So I think this issue is definitely much more deeper and nuanced. And I do feel that Web3 and the ideas of DAOs offer a sense of an approach of a solution to this space, where the whole idea of both like moderation and sort of training, in some sense, the words that need to be banned, etc., can be distributed across a system of people rather than a central entity sort of owning that right. So I think that would be my take on this, but this is definitely a multi-layer sort of
balancing act has to be there. Myna, the same question for you, but it's a little more intricate for you because you're a curator. And, along the way, I'm sure you must have curated a lot of, controversial artists, political artists. In fact, I believe there was an incident at JLF also when it started off. So this is a very sensitive subject. So
censorship, and, the haves and the have-nots. I mean, these are all questions that I think we grapple with on an everyday level. I've worked with 10 of the biggest galleries in India, and also with some very well-known sort of institutional spaces as well. And I know that there are pariahs in that space as well. There are subjects that you cannot touch, artists who create work. And firstly, I mean, not even Web3, like even Web2, just the NFT space itself has broken open a lot of that. it's disrupted this particular space. So we've been able to counter that kind of censorship by including artists who would otherwise not have a chance in the gallery ecosystem. I mean, it also collapses sort of like the spatial, geographic, censorship, nationalism. Our exhibition right now has artists from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Iran, and you know what's happening in Iran right now.
Oh yeah. Oh yes.
So it's an incredibly disruptive space. So definitely we are dealing with issues of censorship on all sides, both from the right and the left. We had a speaker at our opening, not the opening, but actually a couple of days later, we had another panel, and 𝗙𝗪𝗄𝗵𝗄𝗏 was invited to it. And New York is in many ways, there's a lot of cancel culture. And I thought that she was in voice for GLF. GLF is a platform for many voices, and the diversity is actually, to have conversations around diversity is so important. And but there was a lot of attempt at canceling her voice out. And I thought that, and I come from a human rights background, and the show obviously.
I really appreciate your inclusivity point of view. I do.
Thank you. And I felt that it's a show about the politics of representation, the fact that Shazia is a minority voice in a majoritarian government definitely is interesting. I would want to know more about it. So I thought that it was good for both JLF and for us to stand our ground. In many ways, the exhibition got even more attention than it would have. And I think people, and the surprise factor of that, of coming to see an exhibition that was attended and spoken at by someone who is perceived in a particular way. I think that actually worked.
I think I just want to add an extra point. I honestly felt like with the incidents surrounding Mr. Salman Rushdie, the JLF happening in New York at this particular point in time had a little more meaning to it than any other point.
Absolutely, absolutely. Any kind. I mean, I think extremism and this notion of wanting to control what gets seen, what gets heard. The right and the left are not different from each other. Quite honestly, for me, they're mirror images of the same. We are not interested in that conversation whatsoever. I mean, right, Arshit? I mean, I'll let you.
Definitely, and in the spirit of inclusivity, I just like to take it on a slightly different tangent. Given, and I'm revisiting this from before, where I mentioned you have a Wall Street background. Fractionalized art is something that's really been selling well for the past few years. There have been individual platforms on this. Selling it fractionalized on the blockchain is a no-brainer. What do you think? Is the artist community well versed in this? Do they understand this? Are they actively exploring this?
The traditional art community, definitely not. I mean, I think they're curious, but also very perplexed. Art is the visual arts world is very much about exclusivity. So this whole idea of a communal buying of a piece of art makes zero sense to them. They're like, what does this even mean?
I mean, I'm a fan of some really big artists, and I don't think so I can own their paintings. So if there's an NFT platform where maybe they give me special viewing rights when I'm
but what they do understand is editions. I mean, they understand editions. They understand a digital. I think more and more, well-known artists are now open to this idea of having hundreds and hundreds of editions of works that are otherwise not accessible to. I can't afford that kind of work either. I just want to be honest.
Exactly.
But I'm happy to own something that is an edition, an NFT edition of their work. And I think they're coming around to that. I think there is a little bit of a crypto freeze around. I mean, I know that the fractionalized buying of art is started off as an interesting idea. I was going to throw this question back at you. How do you think the market is doing on that? From what I've heard, that hasn't really done very well. Is that
the
true?
way I see it, the art space actually moves at close to 30 to 35% per year, as opposed to the S&P 500 that has an average moving rate of around 10% per year. So already it becomes a more lucrative investment. And from an artist point of view, they might, like, there's certain artists that have like millions of following online, but when it actually comes down to the art, it cannot connect with the people who actually build these artists up. So Web3, Arpit would definitely agree to me when I say would be an excellent platform for these artists to, be one with the audiences without
absolutely.
major middlemen. Yeah.
Yes. I agree.
Arpit, would you like to throw in a couple of words there?
Don't I miss your last point? Sorry, can you?
We were talking about fractionalized art and how Web3 would enable, artists to directly engage with their fans.
So I think I will kind of take it from what Myna also said, right? So a lot of these artworks, they have a niche market, right? And there are only so many people who can actually afford that artwork. So that's owning that as an NFT is definitely an interesting proposition. But from an investment point of view, I have and this has been picking up really, really well. I have, in last few months, I have seen multiple projects which are working essentially on opening up, these collectible artworks and fractionalize them and open them up as an alternative investment product. So a lot of activity has been happening around that. But I think the interesting point is going to be around the legal aspects of it. How do you, for example, if I fractionalize, if I own a fraction of one of the very famous artworks, right, of, let's say, a famous artist, and what are my rights on that fraction? Am I allowed to take a printout of that and print it on a lot of shirts and commercially use it, right? So around those rights, a lot of action has been happening. So I have been in discussion with a couple of interesting folks who understand this space. For example, a very big law firm based out of Hong Kong, right? So they have a tokenization platform. So essentially, these are some of the questions that are going to come. So I know a project which owns Bored Apes, and what they have done is they have taken those Bored Apes and printed them on sneakers, and they are now creating those lines of sneakers, right? So that rights portion, owning that as a fractional NFT in itself may not be very interesting. There can be price action, whatever, but what can you do with that fraction? That is going to be interesting, and that is going to be an area of increased research in times to come, because that is something how till date it is very clear. Somebody who owns an artwork, he owns an artwork in that shape and form, right? But when you can create thousands of fractions of that, what will be your rights around that? I think that's going to be an interesting space to see.
But as long as I get my money plus a little bit extra, I'm happy. I'm not making any t-shirts or shoes.
Rohan, that's only one way of looking at it, right? So you are looking at it from a price action point of view.
Yes.
How prices move up and down there for that artwork. That is only one way of looking at it, right? And that's somewhat of a passive thing also. You can just take a fraction and then flip it, and when it goes up and all of those things, which is good. Essentially not bad, which is good. But I think which is just a very which is a small starting point into this overall.
I mean, I know, I understand it's very small, but in history, retail has never had a chance or access to such tools. And when you open it up and when you tell people on, a platform like WazirX or 𝗙𝗙𝗃 that regular people can maybe buy $50 worth of an investment tool, that's quite historical for me, at least, the way it helps the little man out.
I actually agree with both of you. I think what Arpit is saying is absolutely spot on. I'm so interested in that conversation as well, Arpit. I hope you can keep me in the loop for that, because that is a question that I get from the art world all the time about, what happens even with this whole point of, when you buy an NFT, does this mean that who has the rights to the NFT? Is it the artist? Is it the person who's bought it to the original image? So the legal parts of that, as they are fleshed out, as we research them, as we shape them, is going to be a very important part, especially for the fine arts, visual arts part of it. Well, the flip side of that is also, trying to convince people that when they buy an NFT, they actually do have exclusive rights over something that's intangible, maybe in the digital space. And
Myna, I just want to button in on that point. I was also talking about, actual physical art. Like, I know you've curated some really major artists, and they've generally had buyers only between, millionaires and billionaires, maybe. But now, with this particular model to fractionalize the actual physical art, they have a much wider audience base who can buy. So, that goes up drastically.
Right. And you're right. And actually, it's not just to the millionaires, etc. I mean, we have we have tried the opposite as well, where we've had very well-known artists like Seema Kohli, whose works would generally sell for 50 lakhs plus, sell for, say, a couple of $1,000s, and several editions of that would allow people to have access to an original piece of art. The artist will always imagine themselves as an individual. And so everything around that is about, an individual piece of art, and art that cannot be replicated. And that, I think, fundamentally is going to be philosophically something that this digital world is going to have to grapple with. Even the digital artists will. And one thing that I wanted to talk about is, how we've been talking to MIT, we've been talking to Infinite Objects. We've come up with these very novel ways of displaying art. When people do buy, when collectors buy an NFT work, how do we ensure that they are the only people who have access to this work, that their investment in this work is acknowledged. And that comes to the second part of it, is how do you display NFT art? We've discovered, we were close to the Armory because the Armory show was happening right around the same time that our exhibition opened. And we found out that now there are all of these products that are being launched in the fine art world, which allows for the works to be projected directly from a wallet. So there's no way to really, so unless you've bought it in the digital space as an NFT, you cannot display it. You cannot download.
Your work is going to get a little more crazier, because like the physical adaptations and the production of it all in the space is getting crazier and crazier. And with VR, XR, MR, you could go nuts.
Yes, actually, I also helped. I was a curatorial advisor for one of the first NFTs that sold in auction at 𝗙𝗏𝗍𝗶𝘗's, 𝗙𝗏𝗍𝗃𝗍's work, and it fetched a fair price. It was $96,000 that it fetched, and it was a physical piece of art, but it was a phygital NFT because the work was not complete.
It had a digital mark against it. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, the work was not complete without, otherwise it's just a canvas, but it was not complete without the process documented on the metaverse. So we felt like that metadata was also very much a part of the work. And I think the buyer, who was a tech buyer, and very interested in tech solutions, the person who bought it appreciated that it was something that he could physically show, but also had access to the entire process, all of the different iterations along the way, that individually could also be beautiful pieces of art digitally. So I think that more and more now there are these considerations, and even fractionally, if people were to buy, would they be able to display it as one of theirs if there are certain sort of display units that only allow you to show works that you have bought? I think
I just thought of this as a curator. Fractional buying is a thing that directly results to the number of people actually visiting the art gallery. The intake could go up by factors of 5 to 10 to 15.
Yes. That is an exciting prospect, and one that I will push as an idea also in my next curation. I think
definitely
that's a good business.
And finally, I just want to paint a picture for you guys that's been bugging me in my head Arpit, I'd
Sorry,
love to
Rohan,
get your point of. Yeah, please, Arshit, please,
just
please
a
add to
second
this.
to just sort of also like build on the fractionalized art ownership aspect. I think as an artist, what is also interesting is that given that technology allows for such a thing to happen, how do you sort of incorporate fractionalized thinking of art as the intention of the project itself? So to sort of start thinking of things that actually artworks that make sense for it to have distributed ownership, where it's like you're building an artwork for a communal kind of collectorship, right? And so it's not, let's say, just one visual or something, but it's more of
it literally changes the foundation of the artwork itself, like
yeah. So I mean, just using the technology in a way that sort of creates a newer way of thinking of art itself, right? So this whole idea of fractionalized ownership, I think, can lead to that. So like just someone, let's say, owning lines of a poem or something, right? And then sort of having a collective way for them to come together to perform the poem or something of that sort. Or even this whole idea of art on chain, like with platforms like artblocks.io, where as an artist, I would generate sort of the recipe for the artwork. And then each time you mint the NFT, you create a new artwork from that recipe. So in some sense, the artwork is actually that recipe, but each of the individuals who mint, and this has become really popular. And for me also, as a generative artist working with code for creating art, this is interesting in terms of being able to have 1,000 not editions, not they are 1,000 unique pieces, but they are sort of tied in or constructed from the same recipe of a program that I've written, right? And then that also is a way of thinking of fractionalized ownership of this meta recipe that has been the starting point for the artwork.
Also,
so I think
this is also just, I'm sorry to butt in again, this is also bordering on, a community management aspect and building a community around it, which wasn't there associated with the artworks before. So it also adds an extra layer on that.
And point. Even for like aspects of data collection, etc., right? Like with, for example, the Strange Enders work, we collected using Mechanical Turk and in-person collection, 2,500 people drawing a certain thing. So sort of thinking of the artwork as not simply sort of the final image or something, but also this whole process where there is a communal like aspect of data collection where people send in data of a certain kind and they get sort of become part of this larger process, and then they're given back a certain sort of artwork.
Yeah, like again, sorry to butt in, like on Reddit, there's this subreddit called Art Place, where individuals can go and start painting particular blocks, and it's quite crazy the way community works there.
So I think that's what's exciting. Like technology enables new kinds of art forms to come into place, and I think that is what, as artists or as someone who's engaged with tech art, I'm very fascinated by exploring. Like, so sort of evolving the idea of art itself and what it means in today's age.
For sure. So, finally, we're getting towards the end. And like I said before, I just want your attention for like 2 minutes. I'm going to paint you a picture. We all know about Twitter and Twitter bots and how, you could manipulate 5,000 bots to work certain keywords into the trending position. I mean, this is one aspect. Now we have AI generated art. That's one aspect. Now, added to that, Polygon has super low fees. And there's a particular aspect called wash trading, where, if somebody publishes an NFT and he can actually, have like another 5,000 bots constantly buying and selling the NFT. So to an outsider, it looks like, oh my God, this artist is really selling a lot. And based on that assumption, I go by and the program stops and bang, the guy's made his money. So, Arpit, are we getting to a point where like a super programmer like a Neo could essentially be using 10,000 bots across Twitter, Reddit, on OpenSea and be shilling artworks through prompting them off an AI platform. Is this already happening? Are we close to it? Like 𝗙𝗀𝗵𝗶 could essentially be the 3 founders and 10,000 bots, essentially.
So Rohan, honestly, this is not, while technology kind of enables newer ways of doing this stuff, but this, at the end of the day, this is a people's problem, right? So technology is just a tool which you may choose.
It is.
So honestly, maybe, factually, I'll not comment on it much, but of course, there can be a lot of different.
I mean, just as a disclaimer, I don't know the 𝗙𝗵𝗵𝗀 guys. I know they're not using bots. I'm just to be on the safe side, but in case, so just trying to imagine this.
So just, the one that you mentioned, right? So there is a possibility that such kind of activities may or may not happen, honestly, because at the end of the day, it is about how creative people can get into doing stuff in the wrong way.
This is pretty creative, I would say, no?
Yeah, no, not really. I would say this is not even really creative. This is just a very, very common pump and dump kind of a activity that you are mentioning, right? Which is not at all creative. But I think at the end of the day, this is a people's problem. So essentially, you will have to look at it from both the sides, right? There are people who want to manipulate market using these tactics, and then there are people who are there to kind of correct also, right? Correct stuff. For example, in one of the very recent hacks, I remember that one of the community members, he took charge and he hacked, he kind of launched a DDoS attack on the attacking address and kind of disabled that wallet to siphon off any more funds, right? So essentially what happens here is that now here not only one, here the whole community is fighting these kind of activities, right? So that's the power of it, right? Rather than
I mean, I'm being a little crazier here by suggesting maybe, in 5 years' time or 2 years' time, there's an AI artist. And I mean, that doesn't sound so far away, does it, Arshit?
So, honestly, speaking about art here with Harshit and Myna sitting, I think I'm kind of still too far.
I mean, same here. I'm getting the same feeling.
But why not? I'm not sure. Why not? They can very well be there, right? They already are there. You can have all kind of generative arts, right? So yeah, of course. But I think I'll just stop there and have Harshit or Myna take this.
Harshit, I'd love to get your view on this, man. Yeah. An AI artist who's prompting his stuff and then selling his NFTs and then shilling it on Twitter and Reddit.
That's the dream.
How are you going to find that, man?
That's my retirement plan, right? Like I'm going to...
Hell, you could write that Python script.
That's what I'm building. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm building and going to very soon just have my AI take over.
Did I just reveal like your master plan by any chance?
It's okay. I mean, I don't mind people sort of starting to wait for it already. But yeah, so I don't see a reason why this won't exist and why this shouldn't exist. And by all means, I think things like this should exist. And that's why art is there, right? Like even if we start introducing a sense of censorship and cancel culture or things like that within the art realm, I don't think we're going to get anywhere from that. So I think, and it's very much in the realm of possibility. In fact, I have done works where I have sort of looked at like the opposite, actually, just as sort of a pun on things, to look at the least liked artworks on Instagram and use that as a training data set for creating art, right? And then sort of just showing that around and saying that, I mean, they also sort of came out quite nice. So
really interesting.
The whole idea of what happens in art, especially, is if I were to create this, I would still be the artist. Like I would, the person who actually intentionally created this bot would be the artist. And if they're able to sort of use this as a mechanism of commentary on automation of aesthetics, automation of culture, I don't see a reason why that conversation shouldn't happen and shouldn't be put out. How people respond to it is how people will respond to it, right? And there is a deeper questioning of sort of where we are headed to. The whole idea of existentialism comes into picture with this. And as a work of art, the intention is what matters. And just, I mean, we all know sort of the paperclip AI, right, which was optimized to just produce paper clips, and it ultimately like ended up like it's a thought experiment, but it ended up destroying the world. And so sort of when creating a system of AI, you have to be very mindful of sort of the intentions behind it. And if as an artist, I intend to run this as an experiment, by all means, I should do that. Yeah.
That's really brilliant, Arshad. I would love to keep in touch with you and find out what exactly went on with these experiments. Myna, final words from you with this crazy scenario that I presented.
Yeah,
how are you going to curate this AI artist?
I mean, that would be a dream to have someone do that, like I told Harshad. I think I come from a very different, I mean, the visual arts world, there are several considerations to buying art. And I don't think any amount of bots and no amount of manufactured likes could get a serious buyer to buy a piece of work unless they really had a deep sense of affinity with the work or they really loved it. I mean, 𝗙𝗵𝗵𝗁, who was one of our artists, said, he was being interviewed by AVS, which is one of the leading channels in North America. And he was asked this question about, how do you feel being a senior artist, stepping into the world of technology? And he said, well, technology is just a medium. All of these spaces are, newer marketplaces, but ultimately it's the quality of work. And
Yes.
As a curator, I certainly agree with that.
Definitely. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for giving me your Sundays from literally across the world. This is really meant a lot, and I'm sure our community has definitely learned a bunch of things that they weren't aware of prior to this.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This was a very learning experience also for me. I enjoyed the conversation very much. Thank you for taking time to invite us.
Definitely,
Thanks,
and hopefully we guys get to meet in physical life pretty soon.
Absolutely.
In one of these events somewhere.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. And Rohan, that's called IRL.
Amen. I only look young. Huh?
Hoping to see you IRL soon.
Definitely,
and
definitely.
𝗙𝗵𝗵𝗁 and all of the terms, right? But this has been really exciting, and it's been a perfect way to start the Sunday. I think really enjoyed the conversation with all of you. Thank you for having me.
Likewise, man. And I'm going to individually connect to you guys on mail and other social media apps for sure.
Thank you so much.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Take care.
Cheers.
Take care. Bye. Bye.